When we were younger, we were able to easily learn our first language. But now that we are actually grown up, it's harder and yet more rewarding to learn a language than when we were little. So why is it that when we were little, when we were younger, we were able to learn our first language in a much easier way? Many of us actually learn our mother language by being immersed in it, since we grew up in a place where everything was in that mother language. There were like maybe books, TV, advertisements, and we saw people around us talking that language, and we saw them and heard them talking that language. So with time, we actually got to familiarize under that mother language. We actually started to relate actions and objects with those words and their meanings. So how did we learn to conjugate and use these words in sentences? Sergio?
There are many theories that explain how we learn languages, but the most accepted one is Noam-Chomsky Language Acquisition Device, or LAD for short. This theory states that all humans are born with the knowledge of what makes a human language. In other words, it claims that we have the innate ability to learn a language. This device that we have is how we learn languages. And even though it may not look like it, it gives us the explanation of why children learn languages faster. But first, let's establish what language means. According to the Collins Dictionary, language is a system of communication that consists of a set of oral, manual, and written symbols that are used by a particular group of people to express and communicate themselves. This need is also why we developed the LAD, and why we as children learn much faster. As we want to communicate with each other as fast as possible, our mind wants to learn how to do that the fastest way. So we ended up evolving in such a way that in the early stages of life, we absorb information and can process it much faster than as adults. And with the LAD, we can use that information to learn how to speak a language.
That's why when we're young, we easily are able to learn new words and know how to use them. This is also why we start asking a lot of questions, because we are absorbing so much information, we kind of want to know where this information comes from and why is it true. Who doesn't remember these kind of questions? Why is the sky blue? Why do I have to go to school? Why do I have to brush my hair? Since the moment we started to ask these questions, the language we knew started to influence our identity. And to explain it from a perspective from someone to learn more than two languages, we have Prema.
I have learned from experience that there are at least two ways language affects our identities. By how we understand that language and how that language makes us understand the world around us. Because for each language there are a set of rules we have to follow, and those rules help us conjugate sentences and use them to communicate with each other. Those are rules that shape our way of thinking and our overall thought process.
For example, if you said, "This egg and sausage burrito is very good," in German it would be
Dieser Wursteiburrito ist sehr lecker.
which means exactly the same, but in Spanish this would literally translate to
Está muy rico este burrito de huevo con salchicha.
or "It is very good, this burrito of eggs with sausage." So in German you would first think of the burrito and then that it tastes good, while in Spanish you would first think of how it tastes and then of the burrito.
Even though it isn't obvious at first glance, this causes a change in the way we process information, like how we come up with solutions to our problems and how we remember certain events from the past. Another way language helps us shape our identity is by how we understand information, especially from the media. For example, the knowledge I can understand from the news in a certain language can't be understood exactly the same way from another person whose mother language is not the same as mine. Personally, I can understand English and Spanish pretty well. Both of those languages lets me understand things slightly different. Like, for example, pop culture. So that causes that the way I communicate and the way I act with people from my community depends from what community I'm in.
So, now that you know more about language, maybe you can appreciate people who speak more than one language a little bit more.